2 Kings chapter 4. And a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared Yahweh, and the lender has come to take my 2 sons to be his slaves. And Elisha said to her, What should I do for you? Inform me. What do you have in the house? And she said, Your female servant has none at all in the house except a pot of oil. And he said, Go, borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors, empty vessels, do not get a few. And when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons. Then pour it into all those vessels, and set aside the filled ones. So she went from him, and shut the door behind her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured it out. And it came to be, when the vessels were filled, that she said to her son, Bring me another vessel. But he said to her, There is not another vessel. And the oil ceased. So she went and informed the man of Elohim, and he said, Go, sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on the rest. And it came to be on a day that Elisha went to Shunem, where there was a prominent woman, and she took hold of him to eat some food. And it came to be, as often as he passed by, that he turned in there to eat some food. And she said to her husband, Look, I know that this is a set-apart man of Elohim who passes by us continually. Please, let us make a small upper room on the wall, and let us put a bed for him there, and a table and a chair and a lampstand. And it shall be, whenever he comes to us, let him turn in there. And it came to be on a day that he came there, and he turned into the upper room and lay down there. And he said to Gehazi, his servant, Call this Shunammite woman. So he called her, and she stood before him. And he said to him, Please say to her, Look, you have gone to all this trouble for us. What is there to be done for you? Should I speak on your behalf to the sovereign or to the commander of the army? And she answered, I am dwelling among my own people. And he said, What then is to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, Well, she has no son, and her husband is old. And he said, Call her. So he called her, and she stood in the doorway. And he said, About this appointed time next year you shall embrace a son. And she said, No, my master, man of Elohim, do not lie to your female servant. And the woman conceived and bore a son when the appointed time had come, of which Elisha had spoken to her. And the child grew. And it came to be, on a day that he went out to his fathers, to the reapers, and he said to his father, My head, my head. And he said to his servant, Take him to his mother. So he took him and brought him to his mother. And he sat on her knees till noon, and died. And she went up, and laid him on the bed of the man of Elohim, and shut the door on him, and went out. And she called to her husband, and said, Please, send me one of the young men, and one of the donkeys, so that I hurry to the man of Elohim and return. And he said, Why are you going to him today? It is neither the new moon nor the Sabbath. And she said, It is well. And she saddled a donkey, and said to her servant, Drive and go. Do not slow down, except I speak to you. And she went, and came to the man of Elohim at Mount Carmel. And it came to be, when the man of Elohim saw her at a distance, that he said to his servant Gehazi, See, the Shunammite woman. Please run now to meet her, and say to her, Is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with your child? And she answered, It is well. And she came to the man of Elohim at the hill, and she took hold of him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to push her away. But the man of Elohim said, Leave her alone, for her being is bitter in her, and Yahweh has hidden it from me, and has not revealed it to me. And she said, Did I ask a son of my master? Did I say, Do not deceive me? And he said to Gehazi, Gird up your loins, and take my staff in your hand, and go. When you meet anyone, do not greet him, and when anyone greets you, do not answer him. And you shall lay my staff on the face of the child. And the mother of the child said, As Yahweh lives and as your being lives, I do not leave you. And he rose and followed her. And Gehazi went on ahead of them, and laid the staff on the face of the child. But there was no voice, and there was no hearing. And so he went back to meet him, and reported to him, saying, The child has not awakened. And Elisha came into the house, and saw the child was dead, lying on the bed. And he went in, and shut the door behind the two of them, and prayed to Yahweh. And he went up, and laid on the child, and put his mouth on his mouth, and his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands, and stretched himself out on the child, and the flesh of the child became warm. And he returned and walked back and forth in the house. Then he went up and stretched himself out on him. And the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi and said, Call this Shunammite. Call this Shunammite. Say that 5 times fast. So he called her, and she came in to him. And he said, Pick up your son. Then she went in and fell at his feet, and bowed herself to the ground, and picked up her son, and went out. And Elisha returned to Gilgal, and the scarcity of food was in the land. And the sons of the prophets were sitting before him. And he said to his servant, Put on the large pot, and cook stew for the sons of the prophets. And one went out to the field to gather plants, and found a wild vine, and gathered wild cucumbers from it, filling the skirt of his garment, and came and sliced them into the pot of stew, though they did not know what they were. Then they served it to the men to eat. And it came to be, as they were eating the stew, that they cried out and said, O man of Elohim, there is death in the pot. And they were unable to eat it. And he said, Then bring some flour. And he put it in the pot and said, Serve it to the people to eat. And there was no evil matter in the pot. Now a man came from Baal Shalisha, and brought the man of Elohim bread of the firstfruits, 20 loaves of barley bread, and newly ripened grain in his knapsack. And he said, Give it to the people to eat. And his servant said, What do I set What? Do I set this before 100 men? And he said, Give it to the people to eat. For thus said Yahweh, Eat and have some left over. And he set it before them, and they ate, and had some left over, according to the word of Yahweh. So, that's a hearken to Yeshua. 20 loaves of barley. Feeds 100 men. Where's the other one? Oh, him bringing the child back to life. Yeshua's just gotta, stick out his hand. The dead girl grabs his hand, and she's, up and walking. Lazarus. Alright, 2 Kings chapter 5. And Naaman, commander of the army of the sovereign of Aram, was a great man in the eyes of his master, and highly respected, because by him Yahweh had given deliverance to Aram. And he was a brave man, but leprous. And the Arameans had gone out on raids, and had brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel, and she served the wife of Naaman. And she said to her mistress, If only my master were the prophet who is in Shomeron, then he would recover him of leprosy. And Naaman went in and reported to his master, saying, Thus and thus spoke the girl who is from the land of Israel. And the sovereign of Aram said, Go, enter, and let me send a letter to the sovereign of Israel. And he went and took with him 10 talents of silver, and 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of garments. And he brought the letter to the sovereign of Israel, which said, And now, when this letter comes to you, see, I have sent Naaman, my servant, to you, so that you shall recover him of his leprosy. And it came to be, when the sovereign of Israel read the letter, that he tore his garments and said, Am I Elohim to kill and keep alive, that this man sends a man to me to recover him of his leprosy? For consider now, and see how he is seeking an occasion with me. And it came to be, when Elisha the man of Elohim heard that the sovereign of Israel had torn his garments, that he sent to the sovereign, saying, Why have you torn your garments? Please, let him come to me, so that he knows that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and chariots, and he stood at the entrance of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, Go, and you shall wash 7 times in the Jordan, that your flesh might be restored to you, and be clean. But Naaman became wroth, and went away, and said, See, I said to myself, he would certainly come out to me, and stand, and call on the name of Yahuwah his Elohim, and wave his hand over the place, and recover the leprosy. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? And he turned and went away in a rage. And his servants came near and spoke to him and said, My father, if the prophet had spoken to you a great matter, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, Wash and be clean? Then he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of Elohim. The Jordan is the Jordan, if you're not familiar with this translation. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. And he returned to the man of Elohim, he and all his company, and came and stood before him and said, See, now I know that there is no Elohim in all the earth except in Israel. And now, please take a gift from your servant. But he said, As Yahuwah lives, before whom I stand, I do not accept it. And he pressed on him to accept it, but he refused. Verse 17. Then Naaman said, If not, please let your servant be given 2 mule loads of earth. For no longer is your servant going to make an ascending offering and slaughtering to other mighty ones, but to Yahuwah. Yahuwah, grant forgiveness to your servant in this matter. When my master goes into the house of Ramon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow in the house of Ramon. When I bow down in the house of Ramon, Yahuwah, please grant forgiveness to your servant in this matter. And he said to him, Go in peace. And he went from him some distance. And Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of Elohim, said, Look, my master has spared Naaman, this Aramaean, while not receiving from his hand what he brought. But as Yahuwah lives, I shall run after him, and take whatever from him. And Gehazi pursued Naaman, and when Naaman saw him running after him, he came down from the chariot to meet him, and said, Is there peace? And he said, Peace, my master has sent me, saying, Look, even now 2 young men of the sons of the prophets have come to me from the mountains of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments. And Naaman said, Please accept 2 talents. And he urged him, and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of garments, and handed them to his 2 servants, and they bare them ahead of him. And when he came to the high place, he took them from their hand, and stored them away in the house, and let the men go. And they went. And he went in and stood before his master. And Elisha said to him, Where did you go, Gehazi? And he said, Your servant did not go anywhere. But he said to him, Did not my heart go out with you, when the man turned back from his chariot to meet you? Is it time to accept silver and to accept garments, and olive trees and vineyards, and sheep and cattle, and male and female servants? So let the leprosy of Naaman cling to you and your descendants forever. And he went out from him, leprous as snow. Jesus healed some lepers. Jesus healed many lepers, 10 lepers. That was prophesied in, I believe, one of the Psalms, that the lepers shall return to the temple. Lepers shall be cleansed and return to the temple. Also baptism, washing in water, which is physical but also spiritual. And the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, "See, the place where we dwell with you is too small for us. Please, let us go to the Jordan, and let every man take a log from there, and let us make there a place to dwell." And he answered, "Go." Then the one said, "Please undertake to go with your servants." And he answered, "I shall go." And he went with them. And they came to the Jordan, and they cut down trees. And it came to be, as one was cutting down a tree, that the iron axe head fell into the water. And he cried out and said, "O my master, for it was borrowed." And the man of Elohim said, "Where did it fall?" And he showed him the place. And he cut off a stick and threw it in there, and made the iron float. And he said, "Pick it up." And he reached out his hand and took it. And the sovereign of Aram was fighting against Yisrael, and took counsel with his servants, saying, "My camp is in such place and such a place." And the man of Elohim sent to the sovereign of Yisrael, saying, "Be on guard, do not pass this place, for the Arameans are coming down here." The sovereign of Israel then sent to the place of which the man of Elohim had spoken to him, and warned him, so that he was on his guard there, not once and not twice. And this greatly troubled the heart of the sovereign of Aram. And he called his servants and said to them, "Declare to me, who of us is for the sovereign of Israel?" And one of his servants said, "None, my master, O sovereign, for Elisha, the prophet, who is in Israel, declares to the sovereign of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom." And he said, "Go, and see where he is, that I send and get him." And it was reported to him, saying, "See, he is in Dothan." And he sent horses and chariots and a great army there. And they came by night and surrounded the city. And the servant of the man of Elohim rose early, and went out, and saw an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, "O my master, what do we do?" And he answered, "Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And Elisha prayed and said, "Yahuwah, I pray, open his eyes and let him see." And Yahuwah opened the eyes of the young man, and he looked and saw the mountain covered with horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And when they came down to him, Elisha prayed to Yahuwah, and said, "Strike this nation with blindness, I pray." And he struck them with blindness, according to the word of Elisha. And Elisha said to them, "This is not the way, nor is this the city. Follow me, and let me bring you to the man whom you seek." But he led them to Shomeron. And it came to be, when they had come to Shomeron, that Elisha said, "Yahuwah, open the eyes of these men, so that they see." And Yahuwah opened their eyes, and they looked, and they saw they were in the midst of Shomeron. And when the sovereign of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, "My father, should I strike? Should I strike?" But he said, "Do not strike. Do you strike those whom you have taken captive with your sword and your bow? Set food and water before them, and let them eat and drink and go to their master." And he made a great feast for them. And after they ate and drank, he let them go, and they went to their master. And the bands of Aramean raiders came no more into the land of Israel. And after this, it came to be that Ben-Hadad, the sovereign of Aram, mustered all his army, and went out and besieged Shomeron. And there was a great scarcity of food in Shomeron. And see, they besieged it until a donkey's head went at 8 pieces of silver, and 1/4 of a cob of dove droppings for 5 pieces of silver. And it came to be, as the sovereign of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried out to him, saying, "Help, my master, O sovereign." And he said, "If Yahuwah does not help you, where do I find help for you? From the threshing floor, or from the winepress?" And the sovereign said to her, "What is troubling you?" And she answered, "This woman said to me, 'Give your son, and let us eat him today, and tomorrow we eat my son.' So we cooked my son, and ate him. And I said to her on the next day, Give your son and let us eat him. But she has hidden her son. And it came to be, when the sovereign heard the words of the woman, that he tore his garment. And as he passed by on the wall, the people looked and saw the sackcloth on his body underneath. And he said, Elohim, do so to me and more also, if the head of Elisha, son of Shaphat, remains on him today. And Elisha was sitting in the house, and the elders were sitting with him. And the sovereign sent a man ahead of him. But before the messenger came to him, he said to the elders, Do you see how this son of a murderer has sent away someone to take away my head? Do you see how this son of a murderer has sent someone to take away my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door and hold him fast at the door. Is not the sound of his master's feet behind him? While he was still speaking with them, then see, the messenger came down to him and said, Look, this evil is from Yahuwah. Why should I wait for Yahuwah any longer? So we're doing 2 Kings 4-6 and Luke 24 today. So how's that for a cliffhanger? While he was still speaking with them, then see, the messenger came down to him and said, Look, this evil is from Yahuwah. Why should I wait for Yahuwah any longer? Verse 33, 2 Kings chapter 6. Praise Yahuwah. All right, let's get into Luke 24. Like I said, this runs some Old Testament, this runs some New Testament concurrently, and we're also starting in the middle of the book, so join us, hop in, hop along. This is, this is not a beginner's Bible reading. But if you are a beginner and you're reading the Bible, I don't care if you're doing it with me. I don't care if you're in the middle of the book. Read the Bible. That's what you need, is to read this word and be with your Creator. Have a relationship with Him. And praise Yah. Okay. Move this out a little bit. But on day 1 of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared. And they found the tomb rolled away from the tomb. And they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. So what's going on here is Yeshua's dead, and they're going to the tomb to basically give praise to him. And this is what they find. Let me restart that. Chapter 24. But on day 1 of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, bringing spices which they had prepared. And they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. And having entered, they did not find the body of the Master Yeshua. And it came to be, as they were perplexed about this, that see, 2 men stood by them in glittering garments. And becoming frightened, and bowing their face to the earth, these said to them, Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, but has been raised up. Remember how he spoke to you when he was still in Galilee, saying, The Son of Man has to be delivered into the hands of sinners, and to be impaled, and the 3rd day rise again. And they remembered his words. And having returned to the tomb, they reported all this to the 11 and to the rest. And it was Miriam from Magdala, and Johanna, and Miriam, the mother of Jacob, and the rest with them, who told this to the emissaries. And their words appeared to them to be nonsense, and they did not believe them. Sorry for my pronunciation of these words. English translation would be a little easier, but they're Hebrews. My name's Dylan. I don't know your name, but call me Dylan, and we'll call Miriam, and Johanna, and Miriam, and Jacob. Praise Yah. Verse 12, But Kepha arose and ran to the tomb, and stooping down, he saw the linen wrappings lying by themselves. And he went away home, marveling at what took place. And see, 2 of them were going that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was 60 stadia from Jerusalem. Excuse me. And they were talking to each other of all this which had taken place. And it came to be, as they were talking and reasoning, that Yeshua himself drew near and went with them. For those of you who don't know, Yahuwah is God, also pronounced Yahweh, and Yeshua is Jesus. And it came to be, as they were talking and reasoning, that Yeshua himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were restrained, so that they did not know him. And he said to them, "What are these words you are exchanging with each other as you are walking? And you are sad." And the one whose name was Cleophas, answering, said to him, "Are you the lone visitor in Jerusalem, who does not know what took place in it these days?" And he said to them, "What?" And they said to him, "Concerning Yeshua of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before Elohim and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and impaled him. We, however, were expecting that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. But besides all this, today is the third day since these matters took place. But certain women of ours who arrived at the tomb early also astonished us. When they did not find his body, they came, saying that they had also seen a vision of messengers who said he was alive. And some of those with us went to the tomb and found it, as also the women had said, but they did not see him. And he said to them, O thoughtless ones, and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary for the Messiah to suffer these and to enter into his esteem? And beginning at Moshe and all the prophets, he was explaining to them in all the scriptures the matters concerning himself. And they approached the village where they were going, and he seemed to be going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, Stay with us, for it is toward evening, and the day has declined. And he went in to stay with them. And it came to be, when he sat at the table with them, having taken the bread, he blessed, and having broken, he was giving it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. And they said to each other, Was not our heart burning within us as he was speaking to us on the way, and as he was opening the scriptures to us? And rising up that same hour, they returned to Jerusalem, and found the 11, and those who were with them, gathered together, saying, The Master was truly raised, and has appeared to Shimon. And they related what took place on the way, and how he was recognized by them in the breaking of the bread. And as they were saying this, Yeshua himself stood in the midst of them, and said to them, Peace to you. And being startled and frightened, they thought that they had been a spirit, that they had seen a spirit. And he said to them, Why are you troubled, and why do doubts arise in your hearts? See my hands and my feet, that is I myself. Handle me, and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have. And saying this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they were still not believing for joy and marveling, he said to them, Have you any food here? And they gave him a piece of broiled fish and some honeycomb. And taking it, he ate in their presence. And he said to them, These are the words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that all have to be filled, that were written in the Torah of Moshe, and the prophets, and the Tehillim, which is the Psalms, concerning me. Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures, and said to them, Thus it has been written. And so it was necessary for the Messiah to suffer and to rise again from the dead the third day, and that repentance and forgiveness of sins should be proclaimed in his name to all nations, beginning at Jerusalem. And you are witnesses of these matters. And see, I am sending the promise of my Father upon you, but you are to remain in the city of Jerusalem until you are clothed with power from on high. And he led them out as far as Bethania, and lifting up his hands, he blessed them. And it came to be, while he was blessing them, that he was parted from them, and was taken up into the heaven. And they, having bowed down to him, returned to Jerusalem with great joy, and were continually in the set-apart place, praising and blessing Elohim. Amen. And that's the last chapter of Luke. And today is day 128. You have the link to the plan, and we'll do 2 Kings 7-9 tomorrow. Praise Yahweh. Father, let this word speak to these people. Blessed be your name. Forgive us our sins in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. And blessed be the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen.